r/ask Reddit. People of Reddit. What stupid rule at your work school backfired beautifully? Zero tolerance ended shortly after a bully got thrown through a window because if I'm getting suspended for defending myself, I'm gonna make it worth my while. I taught high school for a decade. Zero tolerance is a cop-out for lazy, spineless administrators who don't want to offend anyone or stand up for themselves. Justice, students, or the educational process. They can just point to a sentence in the code of conduct and shrug their shoulders instead of saying who was right and who was wrong. Back in 2014, our HR made a rule people couldn't go to other buildings. We had 3 buildings within a block of each other. All 3 had shipping areas and the warehouse employees had to go to each building to work. We were told to stay at one building. I mentioned we ship out of all 3, who is going to do the work? The genius said, oh, it'll be taken care of. Next day $500,000 shipment didn't go out. The following day we have a meeting. Why didn't you ship this? 2 days ago we were told to stay in our building and someone would take care of it. The rule was quickly changed. Required every employee to use electronic time clocks to punch in out for work, including lunch. Punching in late or leaving early would cause your pay to be docked and getting a discipline letter. Multiple people wanted to sabotage the clocks, cut the cords, etc. But wiser heads prevailed. Everyone arrived several minutes early and left late, every single day, to avoid getting into trouble. Unfortunately, this created an impeachable evidence of hours worked. The employer had to pay out thousands of dollars in overtime the first month. The clocks disappeared exactly 5 weeks after they were installed with no notification. Every shift, there's a quota we need to fulfill. And then, even if you do fulfill it, you have to keep working until your 8 hours are up. Cue everyone speeding for 4 hours, having a 3-hour lunch coffee break, then slowly moving their ass for an hour. No rule about us taking necessary breaks if we're still capable of reaching the quota. Now we're allowed to stop once we're done. Geez, a 3-hour lunch break is one of the most amazing things I've heard. It gets really ducking boring. For about 3 months in my last job, I would have about 40 minutes work to do per 7.5-hour shift. There's only so much time you can kill in an office building. I worked at Starbucks for like 5+ years before and during undergrad, and at one point our district manager thought it was a good idea to implement a just say yes policy, where we literally weren't allowed to tell the customer no. Lasted for about 3 months, and in that 3 months our unaccounted product and waste went up over 300% because when the post didn't have a way to punch in a customer request, we had to just do it anyways. We also got complaints from stores in surrounding districts because they had angry customers who were requesting things that were against local food service code, and told them that we did it for them at our store. I knew exactly how that policy was going to play out, and I just laughed every time management was freaking out about the problems it was causing. Give me all the money in the cash register and make me a free iced coffee. When COVID started, our boss demanded that our entire team sit in on group Zoom calls, even if the topics on the agenda didn't have anything to do with their roles. She felt it would build team unity. Productivity dropped. Negative Google reviews came in. Staff became more stressed. When she demanded answers on the next Zoom call, one of my co-workers bluntly said, well, I would reply to this woman's voicemail, but I'm stuck on this Zoom call. After a round of needless layoffs at my old company, one of the C-level people had us on a call asking why things weren't getting done. One of my co-workers said, I think the person who would have done that particular job no longer works here. The bottom floor of my secondary school was a square that had corridor all the way around. After some incident where a kid got knocked over, they implemented a one-way system. Unfortunately, they were very strict on enforcing it. If you accidentally walked past your class, you couldn't just turn around. They seemed very proud of their new rule, until everyone started showing up late for class because they had to do extra laps of the bottom floor. That's ridiculous. I am the one who lives closest to work, so if the building alarm goes off overnight, I'm first on the list to get the call from the alarm company. It used to be that if we had good reason to believe the alarm was not an actual break-in, we could tell them not to summon the police and ignore the alarm. I can access the building cameras from home. The most common alarm was the cleaning crew, who were always messing up the disarming. Then a sister site ignored an alarm that turned out to be an actual break-in, and the facilities director decided that no matter what, if there was an alarm we should have the alarm company summon the police, then go to the building, get the police all clear, and reset the alarm. This was a pain in the ass but rare enough, and I lived literally 2 minutes away. Then we contracted for the alarm company to come in and replace all of our panels and sensors. It was a nightmare process that ultimately ended up taking months, and the whole time there were phantom alarms, sometimes multiple times a night. Each time I had to go out in the middle of the night. I'd prepare the required report, send it to the facilities director, and request to go back to the old process. Each time he said no. We couldn't afford to miss a potential real break-in. After about 3 weeks of this nonsense, I was due for some time off. I was going out of town, and the protocol for that was for me to ignore calls from the alarm company, so they moved to the next person on the list, which happened to be the facilities director. In the 5 days I was off, I must have ignored at least 4 overnight calls that all would have gone to him next. Then suddenly, nothing. When I got back I was informed that for the duration of the alarm update, we just weren't going to arm the building at all. So much for can't afford to risk a break-in. A long while back, but my school banned the color pink because a bunch of students were wearing it one October and they thought it was a gang thing. It was for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The rule didn't go well for them. My spouse's workplace realized they didn't have a policy about sending sexual images or jokes as part of their email acceptable use policy, so they added it, except they made it a firing offense to send or receive sexual content. I think the intent was to stop people from subscribing to such content. They also said that your access would be immediately revoked until a determination was made. So someone got fired for something else and decided to send their whole management chain a graphically sexual image, then report it using the anonymous tip line. IT got the report, concluded they did indeed receive sexual content, and did as required, suspended all the involved email accounts, including the SVPs. The policy has since been reworded. There's burning bridges and then there's drying up the lake just to fill it with gasoline. Damn. A place I used to work had a rule that executive level staff needed to be contactable when on leave, so they had a section on the leave form for the address of where you'd be staying and a contact number. Some knuckle shuffler in HR decided it applied to all staff and the shenanigans began. People would put down the address and phone number of sex shops, sports grounds, medical clinics. I gave the latitude and longitude of the place I was going camping and the UHF frequency channel my radio would be tuned to. Late 80s high school rule was no shorts. Classmate came for an exam with basketball shorts on that were below her knees. Teacher made her go home to change. She came back in a micro mini skirt and wrote her exam. My high school principal was known for sending girls home to change if their bra straps were showing. In my sophomore year he tried to send one of my classmates home, but she was like, "Nah, I've got to change of clothes. No need to send me home." So she went to the bathroom, took her bra off, and made a show of putting it in her locker. The principal was pissed, but couldn't do anything about it since she technically was following the dress code. It became a thing. Like, hundreds of high school girls removing their bra at school or just showing up braless as a big duck you to the principal. Couldn't buy drinks at lunch with cash money. Had to buy some voucher. They were just cheaply made laminated pieces of paper. This was 2001. I was 13 and scanned the vouchers and printed them out on paper that kinda matched the color of the vouchers, and laminated 10 myself. They were horrible made and not even the right color on the backside. Also crudely cut out. I made about 100 of them or passed them out after I tried paying with them for myself and encountered no problems. Made some new friends and upped production. Took them about 3 weeks to find out, but by then the fakes ones had intermingled with the real ones and had already been resold to students via the student office. About half of the vouchers sold were fakes. Drinks were cash only from then on. They had no choice to accept the fakes one for a little while longer though, as they had sold and charged for some of them. I went to a strict Catholic school with uniforms. The kids in 4th 8th grade had to wear belts until we got a new principal who made it mandatory for all the kids in the school to wear belts. Many bathroom accidents from kindergartners, first and second graders later, and complaints from parents. Of course, the principal rescinded her addition to the dress code. More recently, this principal was fired for embezzling money from the school. You can't speak a foreign language at work unless you're a certified translator in that language. We had a guy in a customer service position that spoke Spanish as a second language. Yet, his regular Spanish speaking customers were confused as to why he could no longer speak to them in Spanish, because they knew he was fluent. Eventually Jay explains to them in English that they made it against the rules for him to speak Spanish. They weren't happy about that. No more swipe cards to get in the building. From now on, it's going to be fingerprint sensors. That was 2 weeks before COVID-19 happened. My workplace also tried to swap out to fingerprints but needed to go back because a few of us were rock climbers whose fingerprints changed constantly. Back in the early zeros, my high school implemented a policy that you had to wear your id tag at all times. If you didn't have it on, you were sent home. So many students lost their id tag to go grab food or skip a class. We were the only graduating class to wear them all 4 years. The policy ended soon after. Back in 2011, a company I worked for had the bright idea to block all social networks because, you know, employees should work instead of slacking off on Facebook. I could write volumes of books on the toxic culture in that place, but the owner/president, who lived in a different country and visited about once every few months, was universally feared by everyone, and a few days before his arrival the whole building went into panic mode. So a few weeks after the social network ban, His Royal Highness shows up, and 5 minutes later half of IT department is scrambling to his office. Apparently there was an issue with the Wi-Fi, or at least that's what he figured since he couldn't log on to Facebook. It was fixed in seconds. A few years and 3 promotions later, I make a joke about it with him. Instead of a laugh, I get a confused look. Turns out he still thinks it was some internet problem, since whoever decided to ban social networks didn't have the balls to tell him about it after the incident. People who were caught wandering the halls or skipping classes were sent straight home. Similarly, when I was in high school, I once got suspended for ditching school too many days in a row. I was working as a medical assistant at a private practice medical clinic. Our clinic manager wouldn't allow the new receptionist to drive to the bank to deposit cash. Made her walk carrying the money bag so that she couldn't drive away with the money. Bizarre, I know. That went on for a few weeks. Then the receptionist was mugged and over $1,000 in cash was stolen. She was allowed to drive after that. At my old school you could get suspended for most minor infractions. This included smoking. However, if you were a witness to other people smoking, then you would get suspended along with them. So this ended up with everyone constantly working together to hide the smokers at all cost, otherwise just about everyone would be suspended. Your school just wanted to teach everyone how to be better liars while also not having to deal with the smokers. My Catholic school told us to leave space for angels while dancing at middle school dances. The theology teacher then told us angels have no physical form. Cue lots of kids gleefully defending their attempts at dirty dancing. Telework was deemed unattainable for most Fed jobs, much to employees' dismay. Then COVID hit. Now it's all portable. Good luck to the government if they try to revert back to no telework. My boss started putting all staff required to start 15 minutes earlier than indicated on the roster. I started keeping track of my unpaid overtime and stung her for 3 paid days off. That's not required anymore. I worked for a company that did that. 1 lawsuit later, they don't do it anymore and owed a lot of us back pay. This one is great. We had a no dating at work rule, and the director started seeing someone and other people had their hidden relationships as well. That rule was nullified when the director announced his engagement, and so about 6 other couples came out. We no longer have that rule. However, people are to let the admin know of relationships now. I would say 0 tolerance. Before that, kids would get in fights and one, maybe both, get suspended. Today, kids get sent to the hospital because what's the point of going easy when you can best the shit out of a kid and have the same results? The private school where I used to work hired a second deputy head, whose main function seemed to be creating rules and policies without stopping to consider whether they were really needed. Their piece de resistance was to give all the students little laminated cards advising them that if they were being harassed, for some reason, This person always pronounced the word as arrest. They were supposed to tell their tormentor, "I've had enough. I want you to stop saying that." The students, all in their mid to late teens, reacted predictably. Most of the cards were soon spotted floating in the river that ran through the village where the school was located, and the phrase "I've had enough. I want you to stop saying that" was used frequently by students to whichever member of staff asked them to comb their hair / make their bed, settle down and work. I do remember asking one of the school's star rugby players whether the phrase had ever been used the way it had been intended, and his response was, "Yes, but I kicked the guy in the balls while I said it." Not mine, but an old roommate of mine was a senior developer for a small company. It was an open secret that one of the other senior devs, a guy who had been there since the beginning, would sometimes spend time looking at plastic surgery photos, before-after shots, photos of active procedures, etc. He did it enough that people would poke fun at him about it, but he didn't seem embarrassed about it, and it wasn't harming anyone. Well, one day a project manager said something to the CEO about this guy's ongoing plastic surgery obsession, and the CEO flipped. He said that, going forward, no one was allowed to use their work computers to access external websites at all. Anyone who's ever been a developer knows that half the job is googling stuff. So this policy pretty much halted productivity in its tracks. It only lasted a day before the CEO retracted the rule, but let everyone know that their browser history would be monitored going forward. After that, no one really changed their behavior. They just started remotely accessing their home computers to browse instead. In chemistry class we had plastic bottles of distilled water which could be squeezed to produce a small jet of water. We used to spray one another's crotches to make it look like you'd peed yourself. To counter this, our teacher introduced a punishment to anyone caught spraying or having been sprayed. Hence, if you could spray someone and get away with it, they would have wet trousers and have to write excerpts from a Martin Luther King speech. Needless to say, the punishment for being sprayed was quickly abolished. New IT contractor implemented monthly password updates and a long list of exclusions in the passwords. No recognizable words, multiple numbers, symbols, etc. When the CEO stopped by our branch, his first question was why everyone had a post-it on their monitor with their current password. The grocery store I work at is now required to charge 5 cents for plastic bags. Because of this we have a lot of customers requesting paper bags. Since our paper bags suck ass, we typically double bags so they don't rip. Well, one day the store manager sees a cashier doubling paper bags and yells at them because paper bags are more expensive and we can't afford to double bag them. So now we have a new rule: you can't double paper bags unless they're really heavy. Fast forward a couple weeks, and my bagger is using single paper bags. Right as the store manager walks by, the bagger picks up one of the bags that wasn't even that heavy and it rips right open, right in front of the manager. We're allowed to double bag them now. In my high school, if you were late for a class, they would not let you in the door. They would send you to the tardy center to get a tardy pass. You get so many of those and you were assigned detention or Saturday school. But while you were going to collect your pass was also the time in which they took attendance. Not being there, you would be marked absent. The attendance was recorded on SoundDrone cards, placed on a clip outside the classroom, and was picked up early in the period by a member of student government who took it to the office for processing. They would then rectify the attendance records with those of the tardy center, and if you had checked in with the tardy center, your attendance was counted. So, if you were late to class, you might as well not bother going. Not sure if this applies, but I worked at a restaurant that started doing Thursday night trivia in hopes of more traffic. The prize for the winner was their ticket would get comped. One guy asked to have everyone in the restaurant's food put on his ticket, and then won. They stopped doing trivia night. Rather stupid to stop it. Just add a $1 limit. I worked on this company that had mandatory 1-hour lunch breaks. Since we ate on the premises, our lunch break was often 15 minutes or so. We tried negotiating having shorter lunch breaks so we could leave earlier and beat traffic. Next day an email was sent from the owner stating the fixed work and break hours for the whole team, and they were to be followed, no exceptions. Cool. Next week, a big client called about halfway through our lunch, and nobody moved. It rang and rang until said owner took the call, talked to them, and immediately came to scold us. Sorry, boss, as per your rules, we are off until 1 PM. No exceptions. A couple of weeks later, we did some work on site for the same client. They were, to be honest, one of the coolest clients I ever had in my life. They took us out to lunch, and while talking we ended up relaying the owner's rule. They had a big chuckle over it, and while the project lasted, they made a point to always call while we were at lunch break just to annoy owner. They stopped paying for extra hours because the only reason we needed extra hours was because we didn't organize our work properly. First, people stopped working late. Some tasks were just impossible to perform within working hours. They ended up having to pay 4 Saturdays in a row, 150% of the income, to 2x times more people just to get back in schedule. No more backpacks or bags. Teachers were mad when you didn't have any supplies. What were we supposed to do, stuff it all in our shirts or pants? Also, as a girl, yikes. They did not think that one through. I can remember getting in trouble for carrying my purse when the rule in Italy took place. They eventually lightened it so we could carry small bags. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.